Hello everyone and welcome back to the Coding Amateur. In our last video, we would have upgraded Tailwind version 3 to Tailwind version 4. And we would have also created a navbar, as you can see in the browser. And our navbar works fine. We can navigate to the About, to the menu, and to the contact page and back to our home page. The challenge with this implementation of the navbar is that we are repeating ourselves for every page within our project. So if we look at the About Us page, we have the navbar code here, and it is repeated in the contact page, and again in the home page, and again in the menu page. So it means that our code is not dry. We have repeated ourselves too many times. And if there is an error, that means we will have to fix that error in the About page, the contact page, the home page, and the menu page. And we are fortunate enough to have an error so that I could demonstrate what I am talking about. So if we go to the console within our Chrome browser, DevTools and console, you will notice this error that says each child in a list should have a unique key, and you would see it repeated over and over again. Now, what does that mean and why are we getting that error? Well, when we decided to use the map function and we would map through the array and then display each item in the array, it so happens that each item is supposed to have a unique identifier known as a key prop. Now, as it stands, there is no way for React to identify each li item that the map function generates. There's no way to identify them, and so React is complaining. Now, if we have to fix that problem, we have to add a key prop to our nav link. So it would be like this: key equal, and then we'd have to use item, and we would need a unique identifier. Now, if we go to our site data, the labels are unique. So we could use either the label or we could use the ID. I prefer to use the ID as a unique identifier. So our key prop would take item.id, and that would solve our problem. And that should get rid of the error. But we will still get the error, although I added it to the menu page. Because if we go back to our console, you would see that I still have the error. Each child in a list should have a unique key. Each child in a list. The reason being, there are 3 other pages that don't have this key prop. And so I have to go to each page and add that in. Now, just imagine if this were a bigger code base, how tedious this task would be. So this implementation of the navbar is not the best. So there is another way that we can do this. And I did suggest in the previous video that we will look at 2 methods. So this is the first of the 2 methods of making this a little more efficient. So in our app folder, let's create a component folder. In our app folder, we'll create a component folder. And inside that folder, we'll create a navbar component, navbar.tsx. And we would do a RFC, right? And we would call it navbar. And here what we would do, we would cut out, so let's cut out our navbar from the home page. Let's cut. Let's save our home page. Our navbar should disappear. Let's go to our file, which is the navbar component. Let's paste that in. Let's save that. Of course, we have to import. So add all missing imports, right? And let's save. And so we have a navbar component. Let's close this off. What we can do now is call that navbar within the home component. So let's call it. And if we look right here, you will see that we can import it like this. And it's imported here, navbar. So let's delete the imports that we don't need or we no longer need. Okay. So we have a navbar. Let's close that and let's save. And there we see our navbar. So the code is no longer within the route module, but we have placed it into a separate component. And what we are doing, we are just calling that component. So we have an instance of the navbar in the home function. So let's do that for each page. So that was the home. Now, if we go to the home page, we go to the about, we would see that the about still is displaying the navbar, but it's not the navbar component. The about page still has the code embedded. So let's delete that code. And let's import navbar. All right, let's import it and let's close that off. And let's delete the imports that we no longer need. And let's save that. And if we go to about, we still see the navbar. So that works. So let's do the same for menu and contacts. Okay, so now we have implemented our navbar component. And isn't that much nicer? Isn't it much neater? Our route modules are not cluttered with unnecessary code, and I use that term loosely. I mean, the navbar is necessary, but the code doesn't have to be within the route module. So we have removed the code, the navbar code from our route modules. We have created a component where we can now call that navbar. And in each of these pages, we can import the navbar. And what we are seeing is an instance of that navbar. So we have home, about, menu, and contact. And that works. Okay, so it is much easier to maintain. So now, because we have the code in one place and we are calling that code, that component in the different pages, we just need to, if we have an error or a problem, all we need to do is make a change in one place. And so now I can add the key prop to here. Let me spell that properly. Key item.id. And if I save that, it should fix that error. All right, so let me just refresh. And let me refresh it again. And let me, and let me refresh it again. So I'm refreshing the page, and we are no longer getting the error. Change page, no longer getting that error. Change back to home, we don't see that error anymore. So this is more efficient, and I was able to fix that by creating this navbar component. It's easier to use. However, we still have a repetition, because even though this is a little more efficient, we still have this navbar in every page. Navbar again, menu, navbar, about, navbar. So if we create another page, another route, we have to go into that page now and implement again a navbar. So while this is much better than our previous solution, it's still not the best because we are still repeating ourselves. Now, I want to make it clear. There are times when we may have to repeat ourselves and a solution might not be very effective, and the cost might be too great to implement that. So as your coding experience grows, you may realize that there are times when you may have to repeat some type of code. I don't want to be hard and fast and say that you should never ever repeat code, but best practice is that your code must be dry. Your code must be dry. Okay, so try as much as possible to not repeat yourself, and in this case we can do that. So let's implement another solution, which I believe is the most efficient way of implementing this navbar. Our next solution is the layout route, and that allows for nesting of child routes. And the children of the layout route will inherit the configuration from the layout route. So what we are attempting to do is to put our navigation within the layout route and allow our child routes to inherit that navigation. So let's proceed. So within routes, I'm going to create a file called layout.tsx. All right, and I'm going to use RFC, and we are going to call that, oops. All right. Let me just, right, layout. So within this layout, we will have a div, and let us call our navbar within this route. So we're going to call navbar. Let's import it. Right. So in our layout route, we have the navbar, but we also need another component, which is known as the outlet, and this is coming from React Router. And what the outlet does is it specifies where to display the children or the child route information. So as we create our layout route and we assign our child routes, the information from the child route, the content from the child's routes will be displayed where this outlet is seen. So if we were to create, let's say, an H1 tag, and this is just for an illustration. If we put an H1 tag and we put child route information below, all the information from our child routes would be displayed underneath this, right? So let's just add that just for illustration, and let's now create our layout route and our child routes. So to do that, we will go to our routes configuration, and we have to import layout. Okay, and we will do layout, and from layout we will have routes slash layout dot tsx, and we want to put a bracket, and this is, we want to open that bracket, and we want to put these routes will now be our child routes. So let's move them up. Okay. Right. And let's save. And so we have just created a child route for our layout. So our layout route is more or less like the parent, and all our other routes are now child routes of the layout route. And so these routes will inherit, or they will be part of the layout route. So the layout route already has the navbar. So the child route will be displayed where we see the outlet. So let's look at that. So you notice that we have two navbar, and you would see child route information below, and our navbar and our child route is displayed below child route information below. See the position here? So if I were to just move this down and save, you would now see that the child route information below is now underneath the child route. So this here is the information from the child route. This here is the original navbar that we still have within the child route. So what we can now do is remove the navbar from all of the child routes. So that is one. About contact, let's delete that one. And let's delete also the import as well. Let's delete the import. Okay, let's go to home. Let's delete that. Let's delete this as well. And let's delete menu. Okay, so we have deleted the navbar, and now you will see that we have a navbar, and we have the information from our child routes, or our route modules that are nested within the layout route. Okay, now you'll see that every page will have this here child route information below, because it is getting that from the layout route. So we don't need that anymore. That was just an illustration. So let's delete that. Now this is powerful because you can add so many things to the layout route, and it will be inherited or automatically displayed in the nested routes. But notice that while we have the child routes nested within the layout route, it doesn't add any additional segments to the URL. So you would not see /layout/menu. And that's the beauty about layout routes. It maintains the same URL. Now, if we look at our code within About Us, there is no navbar. Nothing. We don't have to enter it more than once. There is no navbar in any of our contact pages, none there. Menu page, no navbar there. About Us, nothing. And home, there is nothing. So this navbar exists as a component in our components folder, and then we call it within the layout. So it is only called once. And from there, it is shared across all of the nested routes within the layout route. I want to pause at this time and make a correction. Now, previously, I would have stated in the video that this top navbar would have been the navbar that belonged to the child route, and that this navbar would have been the one that came from the layout route. Now, no, that is not correct. I mixed it up. So actually, this top bar here is from the layout route, and this nav bar here belongs to the child route. So if we look at the layout, we will see that that a navbar is present, and as I would have explained, this outlet is the placeholder or the location where the child route information or content would be displayed. It's underneath the layout navbar. And if we look at home also have a navbar. So it is this navbar and the word home that belongs to the child component. So when I delete the navbar from the home component, and let's delete the import and save, we would see that the navbar from the home component disappears and we are left with the navbar of the layout component. All right, so I just wanted to clear that up. So that was a mistake on my part. So I just wanted to make that clear. Using the layout route is the most efficient solution in my opinion, and the best implementation, I think, of our navbar across all of our pages. Having completed our navbar, we can now focus on adding content to our pages. So in the next video, we will add content to the home page.